halfway through the 2007 ABSA Off-Road Championship Series, and here's our look back at the first 4 races, with exactly that many still to go to decide whether Class Crowns will rest for a year. And the Off-Road Series has been a fantastic development for Darling in the Western Cape. Situated approximately 120 k's up the M7 from Cape Town to the west coast, this haven, made famous by comedian Pieter Dirk Uys and his alter ego Evita Poseidnout, hosted the circus for the 2nd year running, and the little town and surrounds has never quite been the same since. Darling in the Western Cape was the scene for the start then of National Series of 8 races, but the West Coast is always a true test, not only for the fact that it's the first of the season, but because somehow it always ends up being bone dry and dusty as the moon's surface. The testing had been done, the new liveries had been unveiled, the teams were assembled and ready to do battle, and it was a true test for each one of the 64 entries. The men who at the fastest early times were Gary Bertolt and Henry Costain, who changed their Atlas Copco's canary yellow livery to a turquoise blue and inserted a new gearbox, but the rest stayed exactly the same. They were still as quick as the proverbial racing snake. However, the motorite lads let it all hang out. The prologue affords you a relatively dust-free ride if you clock a time fast enough not to get left behind slower traffic. Cox and co-driver Henny Tersteger were determined. Their back 3.5 litre sounded in fine voice. In the SP class, there was the usual serious scrap. No mercy asked or given, and defending national champ Hannes Grobler and Francois Jordan poured everything into it to try to take the top spot for the production vehicles. The proudly South African Nissan Navara was going like a Bowie. And their teammates Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford, a good start for them was imperative. Mark Renier and Chris Birkin had a very encouraging season together last year and were keen to build on that this time round. The Castrol Toyota team would have been pleased as they were just seconds off the pace. The route featured several long straights and then some truly twisty parts, which tested man and machine. 3 laps of about 130 k's each, and Cox opened up the taps early on the straights, while father and son Ryan and Nick Harper were making their big Atlas Copco porters sing along. Well into the first loop, and Naeem Mosaji and Rayan Bodyana and the TTR Racing Jimco seemed to have things running nicely. They were 5th in class. Just behind them, clocking some very competitive intermediate times, it was Shimea Varayawa and his nav Siegfried Rousseau in the Total Motorsport Porter. They logged a 1 hour 25-minute timing for Loop 1. Looking slightly worse for wear, it was Clint Gibson and Mike Brown's absolute bat, with the front right wheel limping ever so slightly. For Nissan's Norwegian import Ivar Tollefsen and the Nissan Navara, the dry, dusty conditions took some getting used to, but he and co-driver Quinn Evans were getting the hang of it. Glenn Gibson and Mark Whitehurst in their absolute Aceco Nissan were 30th overall, going well and leading Class S. Hutchison, the 05 champion, was picking up where he'd left off and was in no mood to slow things down. While Alfie Cox had started 39 seconds behind his teammate on day 1 after the prologue, but he was on his way to clocking the fastest time for Loop 1, a 1 hour and 23-minute effort. But Grobler and Jordan themselves were just a few ticks off the clock off the pace, and in Darling, it's not often that the production cars keep pace with the space frame vehicles. The Atlas Copco of Bertolt and Costain had a problem virtually from the start, and they dropped out, but their teammates, the Harpers, were flying up the order in their bat. Varayawa and Rousseau were battling their car without back brakes, but it did not seem to slow them down much at all. With Foss and Pitchford racing like they always do, an aggressive mix of caution and speed. While lap 2 also meant a meaningful move from Mark Ronier and Chris Birkin, who despite hitting barbed wire and losing time with a puncture, were right in the thick of things. Brandon Harkis, who won here in a single special last year, and his co-Jean Moore were feeling their way in their new car, a Ford Ranger SP, while Manfred Schroeder and his co-Ward Huxtable were piloting the absolute Barnewall Ranger to 2 very consistent laps. For the national SP champions, Ford's Neil Woolridge and Kenny Scholthammer, there wasn't much joy as they were strangely off the pace and had to call it a day. Karl-Heinz Sulwalt and Mannekes Halberg were in superb form in their Sulwalt Transport Zarko and blazed into the top 10, overtaking 35 cars in the process. While Naeem Mosaji and Rayon Bodjana and the TTR Racing Jimco had just dropped 2 places down to 11th, but still going well. Nandus Alberts and Colin Hunter kept the Rapsabat's nose pointed in the right direction quickly enough all day, and they were 12th overall in 7th in Class A. While Gary Gillingham and Peter van Vieren in the Kopenhagen Hotel Bat had overtaken several teams, they were up from 23rd and into the top 15, with the newcomers of 06 father and son, Jan and Hendrik Kraai, just doing what they do so well, keeping it going and leading Class B. However, Class B second places Johan and Etienne Besaidnout in the Edenko Bat had picked up 2 spots to put the pressure on the leaders, with Rokon CO Peter Ruthven and Johan Boshoff in the Rokon Bat making up 15 places, up from 31st. Birthday boy Gareth Bork and brother Robert were having a fun time in the Super Bay Bat, while Chris Visser and Jaapie Baardnorst had to settle for 3rd in their Team Barberspan Castle Toyota, but were pretty pleased with a good drive. With Century Properties Development's Nissan, Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar 1 place further back in the SP class. And just nudging into the top 20, the Besaidnoids were smiling from ear to ear in the Edenko Bat. But whatever the case may have been, the Western Cape dust was everywhere. Just ask Richard Schilling and Chris Davies, who were the only Class S car left in the race. And in Class D, it was the brothers Duplessis, Yuri and Andre, who took line honours by more than 10 minutes. By now, more than 30% of the entrants were forced to call it a day. Jannie Visser and Joks Leroux were determined to again do their bit for Toyota, and they did. They were leading Class E by almost half an hour, with Labuskaghni and Gerber second and 25th overall, a solid drive by the Raysonics team. Giel Nel and Sandra Labuskaghni were 1 place further back, but were 4th in Class B, racking up the points. But there would be a heartbreak for the brothers Gary and Mark White, who had a surprise visit from a puncher just after this, and it dropped them down the order again after a good drive. Jack Peckham and Lucio Santoro were 2nd in Class E and 28th overall in the Ford Ranger 2-litre. With Cliff and Louis Weifeld in their Bosel Toyota Hilux 3rd in Class D, and happy to get to the finish after several small problems. And in the Toyota of Brian Martin and Oki Fourie, there was jubilation as they took 3rd in Class E. But at the finish line, one of the first of 8 races in the 07 ABSA Off-Road Championships, it was Motorite's Evan Hutchison and Akim Bergman who took the line honours in 4 hours and 26 minutes. And in the production car class, there was just no one who could pass a flying Nissan Navara in the hands of 3-time champion Hannes Grobler, who made it 2 for 2 in Darling. Hutchison and Bergman were good as gold, while the Motorite crew made it a double whammy when Cox and Terstegen nabbed 2nd. For the Motorite team manager Hutchison, the sport is his life. But with the helmet off, he's a devoted family man with 2 young children, waiting patiently for Dad to come home from his off-road exploits.
Go to the start again. I'm definitely a family-orientated kind of guy. I enjoy spending time at home with my family. I've got a wonderful wife and 2 kids. It's all brand new family for me. I've got one little 6-month-old son and a 3-year-old daughter. Yeah, I definitely enjoy spending time at home with the family and with the wife, as well as with my extended family. My father, spent a lot of time with him, and my mother and my sister and so on. So that's definitely, that is my priority in life, is my family and my home life. And then the other half of my life is very simple. It's motorsport. My entire life has been dedicated to motorsport. I was born in Natal, in Poundtown, on the outskirts of Poundtown, where the most popular sport in those days was foot-ups, which is what it was called, observed trials now. And my father used to take me to go and watch that as a little 4-year-old and 5-year-old. And I think that's where the seed was planted. We had the Norcots that lived down the road from us. They were famous in those days. And ever since then, I've just loved motorcycles. And as a kid, I grew up with motorcycles, racing them, riding them. And since then, any opportunity to get involved with anything with an engine and wheels, be it on-road or off-road or any kind of engine, that's been my passion. Yeah.
Motorride has been instrumental in the sport, not only for Evan, but for off-road as a whole.
Yeah, with regards to Motorride, I've been very fortunate there again in that they're a very professional company. I know what I'm doing with regards to the racing and running the race team, but getting involved with Justin Cooper, the MD of Motorride, has taught me a lot, and he's taken the team a long way forward. What he's basically done is he's used the same principles that he uses from the business and put them into racing, and we get the best possible equipment we can, we get the best people we can, working within the team and supporting us. I've got some incredible people working for us, as I've already said. We've got Chris preparing the cars very well. We've got some of the best drivers out there. We've got Alfie Cox driving, myself. And then at the race meetings, we've got support from Steve and Brett Parker, who have been around for many years. And it's imperative to have people who know what they're doing, that are professional and can offer you the correct support. So, yeah, sponsorship it's all about sponsorship. It's all about those deals that are getting done. And the most important part about that is you've got to give them back. You've got to give back, and if you can, give back more than what you take. That's the only way you can be successful.
After a stunning 2006, the next era hasn't been so good. We wanted to know from Evan what he figures could be the problem areas.
Yeah, we've had a difficult year up until now, with regards to our standards and what I expected from the team. Although we are doing better than we did this time last year, and we did end up with the first and second in the championship with 2 brand new cars we had built. So I expect the same again and better from this year. The cars were a little bit late in getting them out and getting them tested, so we had a few teething problems there. But we did get a win on the new car's debut. Alfie's won a race, I've won a race, and we're up in the championship, definitely still with a chance of winning, no problem. I expect no less than for one of us to win the championship and the second one to be runner-up. I can't expect anything less than that. That's what I've promised my sponsors that I'm going to aim for, and I'll do everything that's possible to try and get that result. It is an interesting year because the competition is a whole lot better than it was 3 or 4 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago, all you needed was a very good car, and you could go and win a championship. At the moment, the competition is a whole lot better, and you need to be very professional. There are some guys that are really going fast. Nick Harper, he's really come to the top, and he's doing really, really well. And so is Shamir Barihawa, he's also up there in the top 4. I think out of those 4, you'll get a champion at the end of the year, I've got no doubt. But definitely my plan is to have Motorride 1 and 2, no doubt.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going the extra mile to get you financed fast.
Overnight rain had soaked the KZ and sugarcane roads and made things very tricky. Cox, though, broke a gearbox soon after and had to retire. In contrast, Bariawa and Rousseau were having a trouble-free run and was second overall and in class. Grobler in a brand new Nissan Navara 4-litre was third fastest and second in the production car class. With the sun drying things out, though, it brought out the dust again. The McLaren XL dealer team in the form of Jaap and Goederbeen could hardly believe their SP speed. Grobler and Jordan were third overall and leading the production in SP class by more than 3 minutes, but there were clearly no team orders, as the Norwegian mountaineer Tollefsen and Evans were chasing as hard as they could in second.
Going right, going right.
Brothers David and Gary White had impressed all and sundry with their big move up the order from 24th. They were up into the top 15. And as Brandon Harker stopped at the level crossing, he must have been hopeful of a good finish after stating that he would use the first few races to feel out the big Ford Ranger. He was up into third after being 11th at the start of the day. And in Class A, Clint Gibson and Mike Brown were up into third place all the way from 7th. The absolute bat was still going well. Former SA champ Terence Marsh and Peter Groenewold's Jimco was tagging along, 1 race away from a livery and sponsor change. The Cries themselves had put away a few big scalps and on lap 3 clocked a blistering time. They were leading Class B by a massive 28 minutes, while Gillingham and Van Vieren have a never-say-die attitude. And were it not for a troublesome starter motor installing the car twice, Voss and Pitchford may well have been leading. Schilling and Davies, again leading Class S, were next, 12th overall after a stunning drive from virtually the back of the field. But a wrong slot on these narrow roads can lead to trouble and an altercation or two. The traffic jam looked worse than the N1 on a Friday afternoon at 5. For Besaidnout and De Bruin, though, leading Class B, there were no such worries. In Class E, the Balkhuizens, George and his better half Sharon were leading by almost 40 minutes and just had to keep the Toyota on the road to get the win. Almost. While the BB Auto Nissan team were very pleased with being able to survive as well as what they had, the Duplessis in control. And their stablemates, Andre Duplessis and Jan Knox, right on their exhaust pipe. The Ryobi Nissan, with the brothers Henry and Maurice Matten aboard, were also on their way to the line and saw some interesting sights on the way. While Ramon Besaidnout and Stefan Locke in their Toyota gained valuable manufacturer's point for their team by leading the way home in Class D, they had a 10-minute time gap. With the deploys and their retirement fund solutions Nissan right up there in class. Martin and Fourie were next, second in Class E, but quite a long way back. And Shalane and Stubbs and their Vertico also piling on the pressure towards the end in Class B, but showing the scars. With the Sandmaster of the Rochers chasing as hard as possible in the closing stages. And several cars keeping them honest, including Peckham and Santoro in the diesel Ford. Richard Everingham was one of two single-seaters out there and was going well. And a jolly Gary Campbell was right behind him. And even had time to wave. But make no mistake, Gluwe was tough, very tough. With a big dropout rate, the conditions ranged from very hot and dry to wet and muddy, and then everything else in between too.
Yes, it does.
The Harpers, father Nick and son Ryan, were again right in the thick of things and clocked the fastest lap of the day, and that on the final loop too. Voriyawa and Rousseau demonstrated that they were getting the Total Motorsport Porter to listen to them nicely, and they were storming up the order and into second. With Kobler looking for all the world like he was going to make it 2 out of 2 wins in 2007. Tollefson, however, never stopped chasing, but the gap stayed round about the 3-minute mark, and try as he might, it would not shrink. Harkus blistered the Ford around the Zulu Kingdom's lush fauna and flora just 3 odd minutes down from there, while Foss and Pitchford kept the Nissan flag flying high by making it 3 in the top 4. With the evergreen Schilling steering the Pastotec Aceco to yet another very solid finish. Gibson and Brown had killed a few giants on the way and were only 13 minutes down on the lead. With Alberts and Hunter wrong slotting close to the line, but luckily it didn't cost them much time. Gillingham and Van Vieren were nicely settled in Class A, except for this quick correction. While the Cries themselves did some giant slaying and were leading class by a massive 8 minutes. The Excel McCarran was still going strongly, but the De Bruins knew that it's not over till it's over. But the Harpers were still stamping down their authority. With Variawa and Rousseau chasing absolutely all out. And in the production car race, it was Grobler who was still 180 seconds ahead of the challengers, who happened to be his overseas stablemate Ivor Tollefson, who'd certainly not backed off one iota. And Harkus, his car somewhat lighter, going full bore to join the fray. This was great off-road racing. At the end of the last loop, the hot KZN sun had baked all the moisture out of the ground, and engine, man and suspension could feel the different circumstances and conditions. The Rapsa bat of Alberts and Hunter was still sounding like $1,000,000. While the Cries seemingly had another win in the bag, they were on an amazing run. Former national champion Foss, his car still looking good for another lap, came whizzing by, making Nissan hearts proud. While the whites were literally flying to get there. Gibson and Brown did enough to hold their station in the top 10. While there was trouble for the Silvots. That's off-road racing for you.
Not sure what it is.
And Schilling just kept plugging away as is his wont. He was still leading Class S comfortably. Marsh and Groenewald showed that they were getting things back on track after a slow start in the Cape. And in Class B, Besaidnout and de Bruyn's Adenko bat was batting along well. That's pun intended. And the second Adenko bat with the Besaidnout crew were right on their tail, and they knew they couldn't make a mistake. The Barkhuizens were again looking like a high placing and a great showing in Class E despite the loss of bodywork. Besaidnout and Locke, however, would not give them a second to relax and were ready to pounce on any mistakes. With Corbett and Balzar showing just how quick the local wildlife can be. The Kuns were good as gold in Class D in their good-looking Landy. While BB Auto's team were happy to see their crew approach the airfield at the finish line. Martin and Fourie were starting to show that their Castor Toyota was going to be good in 07 in Class E. With the Niemanns, Gerard and Zelda wrong-slotting here right in front of our cameras. Always happens, doesn't it? While Van Tonder and Guapa on the way to 11th place in the productions and 3rd in Class E. Schroeder and Huxtable are masters at saving their car and getting it to the line, and they did it again in Grugluwe. They were 6th in class. Gosling and Carolyn also did a fine job of getting their Kopenhagen Hotel racecoat to the finish and looked quite clean as well. And one for the single-seaters as Gary Campbell brought it home in 17th place in the specials. Gavin Gray and Mark Saru and their Nissan took the second to last finisher spot, with Jack Peckham and Lucio Santoro piloting the Ford Racing Ranger to 4th in Class E after a solid last loop. But at the line, it was applause for the Harpers, who were spectacular yet even-tempered as they crossed the finish line in 6 hours and 23 minutes of racing. They clocked their fastest lap of the day on the final loop of the course. Variava gave it his all on the last lap, clocking the fastest time of the day by almost 4 minutes. But only 19 cars made it to the line. Grobler thought that he'd flattered 6 Ks from the finish, only to discover that he'd actually completely lost a wheel, a testament to the toughness of the Nissan Navara. But he celebrated his 22nd national championship race win in 50 starts since 2001. But only 15 cars finished in the production car race as well. So after 2 races, Grobler with a clear points lead at the top, but Voss and Harkus tied in second. And in the specials, the Harpers, who led the national championship chase, 9 points ahead of Variawa and Rousseau, with Hutchison poised as well.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA. Overcoming
Sun City in the Northwest Province, and more than 80 South African off-roaders were there to make their cars sing for glory and the 07 Sun City 400 title, the 3rd race in the ABSA Off-Road Championship. The route at Sun City is always demanding, and this year they would be the added hindrance of a lot of dust. The area had been without any significant rainfall, thus the cars would churn up tons of dirt in pursuit of getting to the line first after 400 grueling Ks of racing. In the production car class, there was 23 points breathing space between champion Hannes Grobler and his navigator Francois Jordan and his Nissan Navara teammate Duncan Voss and Brandon Harkes in a Ford Racing Ranger. The route was tough, too.
Every 2 years.
You need a lot to survive, and proudly sponsored by Tiger Wheel and Tire.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going the extra mile to get you financed.
Sun City in the Northwest Province and more than 80 South African off-roaders were there to make their cars sing for glory and the 07 Sun City 400 title, the third race in the ABSA Off-Road Championship. The route at Sun City is always demanding, and this year they would be the added hindrance of a lot of dust. The area had been without any significant rainfall, thus the cars would churn up tons of dirt in pursuit of getting to the line first after 400 grueling Ks of racing. In the production car class, there was 23 points breathing space between champion Hannes Grobler and his navigator Francois Jordan and his Nissan Navara teammate Duncan Voss and Brandon Harkes in a Ford Racing Ranger. The route was tough. 2 smaller loops of 120 Ks and then a similar drive with a longer 40 K sting in the tail. Tailor-made to break cars and morale, not to mention the dust that was already causing visibility and mechanical troubles for drivers, navigators and team bosses. For Shamir Varayawa and Siegfried Rousseau, the rougher and tougher the better. He did win the prologue after all, and he was all over Grobler like a rash. The Atlas Copco of the Harpers was rolling along smoothly. Their win in the Glughluwe event proved that their move to the powerful and slick Atlas Copco outfit suited their racing style. But their teammates Gary Bertelt and Henry Costain were not going to let them have it all their own way. They'd also closed the gap. The Barloworld Absolute Ford of Schroeder and Huxtable was next into view, and as they always do, the Ranger Dio was smooth and cautious without being slow. The Silwalts in their Silwalt Transport Zarko next charged past, up 1 position with the roughness of the route a big boost for the space-thrown vehicles. Defending SP class champions Woolridge and Schulthammer were cranking it up too and were hoping for a start to season after posting 2 DNFs. And they were also moving up smoothly. Mosaji and Bodhanya were still holding station in the top 10, with Silwalt and Miller in the second car right up their exhaust pipe. The big Rapsabat of Nardis Alberts and Colin Hunter was 7th in class after the prologue and were racing hard for the top 10. With the father and son, Rob and Gareth Walker in the Super Pave Special speeding along, but only to fall victim to a broken left front upright, which put paid to their challenge. But there wasn't a lot of breathing space. Rearview mirrors had cars in them as far as the eye could see. The third Atlas Copco bat was being piloted by Archie Rutherford and his co-Craig Doubtfire, and they were going well too. But the dust was playing havoc with overtaking and getting into engines and eyes. For Hutchison, the new motorized bat was a pleasure to drive. Tollefson and Quinn was steady as she goes, but admittedly were playing a waiting game. The brand new Regent outfit made a solid debut as Marsh and Groenewald sped by, already 5 places up from 21st. Their teammates, the Cries, were next, and they were shooting for a hat-trick of wins in Class B. Grenier and Birkin had fixed a power problem after finding a faulty coil, but started off rather cautiously, a fine tactic on this route. The Adenko lads, the Besaidnoids, were ploughing along, looking for a podium in Class B. With Bevan Bertolt and Robin Houghton in the second Castrol Toyota ticking along but running into early trouble. This time the car overheated, and they'd also lost the power steering, which in turn made Bev overheat. In Class S, Schilling and Davies were making all the right moves. Harkes and Moore didn't have a happy start, and it continued as they struggled to find a semblance of rhythm.
Straight ahead, 300 meters, 90 right.
The BB Auto Nissan outfit has 2 cars entered, and Andre Duplessis and Jan Knox were up from 40th to the top 15 and were very consistent with their lap times. While Rundle and Roberts in the Baden Tyres entry were also steadily working their way around lap 2's treachery dust and ever-increasing heat. The De Bruins and the McLaren XL dealer team Toyota had started 63rd after the prologue, but they provided the drive of the day to move into 18th place. While Visser and LaRue's steady approach in the Toyota Hilux got them into Class E halfway through lap 2 and straight into the lead. Rowegon's Balkhuizens were also going well in their Toyota after setting off in 54th position overnight. The Ford outfit back at the designated service point was starting to smile as word filtered through, though, that they were going well. Beckham and Santoro challenging in Class E in their diesel Ranger. While Kutsiela Beskachny was having the drive of his life all on his own lonesome in the Raconics Nissan after his co-driver had to return to a burnt-down home overnight. The Kuns in their steady Landy were again doing their thing with great success and were on their way to a solid finish. With less than 100 k's to go to the finish line of the 07 Sun City 400, Nissan Navara Dio, Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford were completely in control and just had to bring her home for a victory, passing backmarkers who were still on their second lap. These 2 men were flying along. And in the special vehicle class, Alfie Cox had passed 17 other cars on a storming run. Woolridge and Scholthammer were next, and they themselves also had a superb drive. But Grobler and Jordan were battling suspension problems and had slipped to 3rd, a strange sight just of late, Grobler in someone else's dust. Sulwalt and Muller were getting a lot of encouragement from the roadside and were on their way to upsetting a whole lot of big names. They were loading up to record the 3rd fastest time for the last loop. While Cronje and Birken's save-the-car philosophy was working, they'd got themselves into the top 5 in the SP class. But their rear-view mirror was full of flying Hutchison and Bergman, who'd sorted out a lot of their early troubles in the Motorrad Bat and were indeed flying. The same could have been said about the new Total Motorsport crew, Naim Mosaji and Rayon Bodjana. They were strutting their stuff and climbed 2 places in class. Tollefson, who is a mountaineer in his spare time, and Quinn were also very consistent and picked off cars in front of them with regularity, while others dropped out ahead, and behind them, Marsh and Groenewald were up from 21st to 9th overall. While their teammates Whitehouse and Langton complaining of oversteer, but were right behind them, also up 13 positions. And the trio of Regent cars was completed by the father and son combination Jan and Hendrik Kraai, who were leading Class B. Schroeder and Huxtable were up to 6th in the production car class and SP, but were hoping to perhaps pick up 1 or 2 more. But 2 punctures ended that idea. Taylor and Keith also produced one of the drives of the afternoon and closed the gap to the Kraais in Class B to just 1 minute and 46 seconds, but couldn't get any closer. Ruocon's White brothers were finishing with gusto, and on the home stretch, they slotted into 9th. With the dealer Toyota of the De Bruins taking 7th in the production cars. And still looking smooth. The absolute bat of Gibson and Brown was also putting together a fine 3rd loop over 180 k's, and appropriately wearing number 10. That's where they would finish. Rowecon's racing team got a 2nd finisher to the line as De Bruin and Brits wove their way around and over the last obstacles. With the BB Auto team grabbing a top 10 spot, with Arnold Duplessis and Yuri Knox nursing the Nissan hardbody through. Visser and LaRue worked their Toyota all the way and won Class E, a well-deserved victory for this likeable duo. But it was close, as George and Sharon Barkhuizen in the Bloemfontein-based Rowecon Toyota were just 59 seconds behind them and chasing as hard as they could. With Rundle right behind them after he'd got some help from Jack Peckham when he got stuck, and that's what makes the off-roaders such a refreshing bunch. They'll stop and help a fellow competitor, even if it affects their own chances. And the emotional story of the day, the race Sonic's Nissan of Krutsiala Baskachny may have been looking the worst for wear, but he soloed it to second in class and a tearful finish back at Sun City. A brave performance for his co-driver, Johan Gerber. While the Kuns were rock solid out there with a Land Rover that seems almost unbreakable. In Class S, Nick Gosler and Richard Carolyn had finally taken the lead after a race-long battle with Schilling, and they made the most of it. While Davies and Schilling battled a myriad of mechanical problems and lost an hour trying to fix them. But it was a packed finish line pavilion that greeted Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford as they steered the Nissan Navara home to a very popular victory. And even though there was evidence of an altercation with a very firm object somewhere along the line, the twosome were celebrating their first win in 4 races. They clocked 6 hours and 48 minutes and beat all the specials to the line. Woolridge and Schulthammer finally garnered some points. They took second, almost 5 minutes down on Foss. 2 times off-road champion Alfie Cox brought his navigator Henny Tersteeg home just 3 minutes later to claim the special vehicle crown and 25 points for the win. The Motorrad team had done a great job of sorting out all the little things that a new car produces. Brandon Harkis, the driver of the Ford Ranger, has a faithful co-driver, Jean Moore. But for him, motorsport is not everything. He actually has a full-time job, and it's on the other side of the work spectrum.
Well, I'm a project manager working for Century Property Developments, a company that does property developments, mostly residential. And my job is to look that things get done, you know, so that the bricks get laid, that the floors get go, the roof goes on, and at the end of the day, we want to make the client happy, so that everything needs to be tip-top.
But how did he get into motorsport? We wanted to know from him.
Working on the car in the beginning was a lot of fun. I just came from school and had needed a challenge and needed to do something, so I started working on the car, and then navigating for somebody was even more, it was an improvement on that. And then navigating, always have a bit of a thing that you think you can do it better than the driver. And that's how it came about, and one day that I ended up behind the steering wheel, and it was a lot of fun. It was a very good experience, and it was just very, very difficult to listen to somebody else to navigate for me driving the car. It was something else, and I think every navigator should actually get into that position so that you can understand what it's all about.
But what's it like inside his other office? Is there sometimes some friction, some build-up of pressure in the car?
Inside the car, navigator and a driver, there's always a bit of aggression there. The driver is trying to get past somebody as quick as possible, and the navigator is trying to show him the right way while there's dust. It's always a difficult situation. And yeah, then there's sometimes words that get spoken, and that doesn't come outside the car. I think every navigator and driver has got their relationship, and I think the things that happens inside the car stays in the car. But yes, it's difficult terrain with a difficult route marking. Makes it difficult for a navigator to come up with a route there and then. And then there is conflict between the driver and navigator. It's natural. But the navigator is there to keep the driver calm, not just to navigate, to give him the pace, to tell him that he's doing fine, and to keep him going. Otherwise, we're not going to have the car over the finish line. That is right, the SP class is extremely competitive at the moment. We've got a world-class car. The car that we built in this country has competed already in Dakar, has competed with Colin McRae last 2 weekends ago, where he's done exceptionally well. And in South Africa, with the 12 entries, it is very, very good competition. I think there's very small differences between them. The class is put together very well, and it can only leave us with a lot of excitement coming up for the next 4 races.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA. Going off the beaten track to find solutions. Finance from ABSA. Overcoming all obstacles.
Botswana is known as one of the most peaceful nations on the African continent, but for 3 days in June, this peace and quiet is shattered by more than 80 cars, which pierces the air with loud noise and speed along desert paths at breakneck pace. It's the Toyota Kalahari Botswana Desert 1,000-kilometer race, leg 4 of the 07 ABSA Off-Road Championship Series, marking the halfway point of the Nationals, all of the categories which were balanced on a knife edge. The route was divided up into a prologue on day 1 over 50 kilometers to determine starting positions for the racing proper on day 2 and 3, when the 75 teams of production and special vehicles hit the circular route that was designed with the Botswana Tourism Board and the local ecology in mind. Former national champions Duncan Foss and his stand-in co-driver and 7-time desert champion Richard Leek in their proudly South African Nissan Navara looked sharp as they sped by early on, seeking a second win in a row after his triumph at Sun City 5 weeks earlier. With another Nissan Corvette and Balzar's Navara closing the gap to the front, things were going to get interesting. And when Corbett gets the bit between his teeth, you have to stand back. For Harkis and Moore, there was an even bigger move. They were 17th overnight, but moved straight into the top 10, even though they wrong slotted here. At the front of the specials, though, the biggest surprise of the day was delivered by Connie Silvot and his son Quinton, who piloted their Transport Zarko out to a lead of almost 3 minutes over the next special. In between that, though, there was Visser and Badenhorst in their Castrol Toyota, who was steady after starting off 10th. The second special was the turquoise blue Atlas Copco Bat of the Harpers, whose cautious approach in the first half was paying off in the second. Matthews and Smith had suffered a puncture 32 kilometers out from the finish line on day 1 and had to be content with third. While the driver the latter part of the day came from Motorrad team manager Hutchison and Bergman. They were 20th in class but passed all in sundry to take 4th. And looking and sounding rather worse for wear after several collisions with Botswana's finest fauna and flora, Bevan Bertolt and Robin Houghton came through, and Total Motorsports' Variawa and Rousseau got things going again after a puncture robbed them of some time. For Bertolt and Costain in the Atlas Copco Porter, their race had been run. Gibson and Brown, though, streaked by, and they were putting together a good first day, albeit too far back to worry their special pace setters. The Ramsabat of Nandis Alberts and Colin Hunter had lost a few places, but was still in the top 10 in class. Marsh and Krinovot certainly gave the crowd at the bridge the royal treatment on the flyby. But it was Herman Silwell who impressed everyone with his fine driving and aggressive lines. Back at the bridge, Schilling also gave the crowd what they come to see, all-out speed. The Cries looked like they were again set to dominate Class B, and who could argue, 3 for 3 and going well. The dust in the last few Ks was extremely punishing, and the specials felt it the worst. Just ask Oregon's David and Gary White. Woolridge and Schulthammer have not had the best of seasons. The defending SP champions hadn't finished the first 2 races, but they opened their account at Sun City. Here they again struggled. But in contrast, their stablemates Fontonda and Guapa and the Unifreight Ford Ranger gave a good account of themselves. Blind in one eye and with body parts all over the show, Tollefson and Quinn showed proof that the African bush is one harsh place. While a whole procession of production cars lined up for the finish after day 1, ahead of the specials. Zamatin nursed his Nissan through, while the Rokon lads just rushed on by. The side note and the brain was solid in the Adenko Bat in Class B. while the Weichharts brought the Toyota home looking very well considering the terrain they'd had to cover. In Class E, Jack Peckham and Lucio Santoro led the championship race by a slender point, and they made sure the opposition knew it. But Toyota's Malcolm Koch and Wayne Brink were keeping them honest. And Brian Martin and Oki Free were just close enough to not let the Ford pair relax. The Barlow World Absolute Ford Ranger of Schroeder and Huxtable was plagued by several small problems, but they too were heading for the finish line after a long 480-odd Ks. However, at the finish line of day one, it was the almost unrecognizable Toyota father and son combination Hichu and Jaap de Bruin who won in 7 hours and 57 minutes. They were just 17 seconds ahead of a charging Grobler and Jordan in the Nissan Navara, who were chasing hard at the end. For Alfie Cox, it was the end of a dream to win in a production car, on 2 wheels and in a special. And an unfancy team, the Silwalds, led the special vehicle category home with another father and son combination, the Harpers, hoping to make the Sunday a fine Father's Day for one family with a victory. On day 2, the De Bruins had a lot of hard thinking, strategizing and driving to do. They'd never won a major race such as this on the off-road calendar before, therefore they were in uncharted waters. The McLaren Excel dealer team Toyota screamed away from the line. As for Grobler and his longtime navigator Francois Jordan, they were ready to do the business. Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar's Nissan made it 3 versus 2 in the Japanese manufacturer's battle up front. The Silwalds were through next, and despite an electrical niggle, they were very impressive on a route which never really allowed the specials to let it all hang out, but they were leading by a good 60 seconds. Twice winners last season, the Harpers were slowly edging their way closer and had made their way past 1 or 2 of the production cars. Nick is a cagey old fox at the best of times. While Visser and Badenhorst are also 2 wily campaigners who know their way around the African bush. It showed. And third spot in the specials was still firmly in the grasp of Variawa and Rousseau, who were 6 odd minutes behind the Harpers. The Motorite team lost Cox early on day 2, but team manager Hutchison kept the black and silver flag flying. They were just more than 10 minutes behind Cully Sewalt, but kept Variawa honest all the way, while Harkus just piled on the speed and the skill to slip into 4th in the SP class with the Ford Ranger. The absolute bat of Clint Gibson and Mike Brown was up into 5th place after a smooth start. Keep in mind that they were 23rd overall and 12th in class after the prologue. With the Ford of the defending SP class champions, Woolridge and Schulthammer carving their way up the field to get into 5th place in the production car class. A fine run, even though he almost collected that gate post. Marsh and Groenewald got the Regent Insurance lads and lasses smiling with a good performance, but that pesky post could have been the end of the road. They were up into 6th. But in Class B, there were no surprises. The Cries, Jan and Hendrik, made it a fine Father's Day when they recorded their 4th win in as many races in 07. They're unstoppable. Cronje and Birkin ground to a halt, but when Berthold hit the same stump as they did, they stole some parts off the Hilux and limped to the finish line in 7th place, a good recovery. Bez Verseidnout and Johan de Bruin were next in the specials. Heredenko backed in 11th place, but 2nd in the B class, 26 minutes behind the Cries. With Louw de Bruin and Rudy Brits 3rd in class, just 63 seconds further back, pushing the Heredenko boys all the way home. In 8th overall, it was the ever-improving Bloemfontein-based Roacon crew of George and Sharon Barkhuizen, who were 38th overall at the start of the race proper. A phenomenal performance. And Ford fans would have been very pleased to see Peckham leading the Nissan of Zermatten, but not for long, as the Rhoby man and his brother Maurice streaked by to take the lead in Class D. With Malcolm Koch and Wayne Brink in their Castrol Toyota in 2nd, 2 minutes further back, their teammate Brian Martin racing in Class E was in turn just 10 minutes down on Peckham. In Class S, it was one-way traffic as Richard Schilling wrapped things up and only had to keep it on the road and compete to win. At the line, though, it was Duncan Foss and Richard Leek who piloted the proudly South African Nissan Navara home in 14 hours and 53 minutes after driving within themselves, yet with enough speed not to have to let the lead get too far away. Nissan made it 2 for 2 as Corbett and Balzar brought their Navara home just 6 minutes down. And then it was the turn of Cully and Quinton Silwald, who enjoyed Father's Day in a great way, a winning way. The Silwalds had started off 15th overall and 9th in class, and it certainly was one of the best performances of the ABSA Off-Road Series in 07. It took all sorts of ways to get there, but eventually they all did, even if it was on 3 wheels, as Richard Schilling eventually did right at the end. At the top of the championship log at the halfway mark of the ABSA Off-Road Series, it's Voss who leads Grobler by 12 points with Cronje 27 down. The Buckhuizens have crept onto the top 10 page with yet another good showing in Class E. And the top 20 rounds out like that. The Harpers, who have exactly 10 points in hand over Hutchison and Bergman, while Varayawa and Rousseau will be ready to bounce, but right off Alfie Cox at your own peril. And the lead in Class B hotly contested, while it's Schilling and Davies all the way in Class S. Until next time, you keep it on the road, we'll keep it off-road.
That was the ultimate test, the ABSA Off-Road Championship. Now fast-track yourself with vehicle and asset